Hey everyone, welcome to Ask Pastor Mike. This is episode 15. Here's our question. Are disease and illness God's punishment for our sins and to bring us back to Him? If I say this, do you promise to stick around to the end and listen to the whole answer? Okay, is that a promise? Yes, you will? All right. Then my short answer is maybe. Let me explain. Sickness and disease and death originally entered the world because of sin. That's clear. That truth is taught in Genesis chapter 3 in what we call the fall, when Adam and Eve in the perfect Garden of Eden, and they were sinless themselves, chose to do their own thing instead of being obedient. That's part of the curse, is sickness and death. And our bodies break down and they get weaker. And so on some level, it's inevitable that we get sick. We'll all face death at some point, and that is part of the curse of sin as well. So I say that because I want you to understand that it's certainly not a sin issue every time someone gets sick and dies. Okay, and maybe some of you have as well, and maybe that's why it's confusing for us sometimes, because we've probably all known someone. I certainly have someone who just loves the Lord wholeheartedly and humbly serves Him and is being effective and caring for others and being obedient to God, and they get sick, and then sometimes they pass away, and it's a very, very hard thing. So certainly not every time that someone gets sick or passes away is it because of their sin. But it is possible. Let me give you a couple of possibilities or answers here. James chapter 1 says that we should count it all joy when we fall into difficulties and face trials of various kinds. And he goes on to say that God will give us the wisdom to handle these situations. But why? Why does God allow that for somebody that's already serving Him? Okay, already doing what's right. Why does God allow difficulty in their lives, often in the forms of sickness? Well, I think Paul gives us an important piece of that puzzle in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Paul was serving God, humble servant, very effective servant, yielded to Christ, but he had a physical ailment. And so if you read 2 Corinthians 12, Paul says 3 times, I begged God to take this away from me. And kind of I'm reading between the lines a little bit, but when I read what Paul says there, it makes me think like Paul is saying something to the effect of, God, I could be so much more effective for you if I wasn't sick all the time. If I didn't struggle with this physical limitation, think about how much more I could do. That's what it seems like to me anyway, when I read that. So this is God's response to Paul, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul goes on to say, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. No. Every time someone gets sick, it's not because they've been sinful and God is punishing them. Sometimes God allows us to be sick, to struggle with these kinds of things, because when we're weak, we are forced to draw closer to God. That's what God said to Paul. No, actually, Paul, I'm not going to take this away from you because I want to make sure you stay really close to me. And we could say, well, why don't we just do that anyway? Why don't we just all agree that we need to be closer to God and not have to struggle with difficulties? Well, good question, but we don't, do we? We don't just naturally draw close to God. Often when things are going well in our lives, we think, it's going good. I'm all set here. I don't need God. I've got this figured out. And we have a tendency, now maybe if that's not you, then okay. But generally speaking, it's really easy for us to get into cruise control when things are always going well. Now, that said, there were people in the Corinthian church who were sick because they had sinned, and God was trying to get their attention and draw them back. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul says, now some of you have been abusing the Lord's table, you've been disrespecting this ordinance that God has given us. And he says right in 1 Corinthians 11, he said, for this reason, some of you are sick and some of you have died. And then in Hebrews 12, we read there that God disciplines the people that he loves, like we discipline a child. Why do we discipline our children? Well, we discipline them to save them from a worse fate. Basically, our little toddler runs out and goes to put his hand on the wood stove. And we yank them away. We don't want him to do that. And we give him a little swat on the bottom, or we scold him, don't touch that stove. Why do we do that? Well, because we know that if he follows through on his desire and does it, that it will hurt him. It will be bad for him. And so God sometimes disciplines us when we sin for the same reason. Being sick is not good. It's very difficult. It causes us to struggle, but sometimes God disciplines us to save us from a worse fate. Hey, you're going down the wrong road. I want you to come back. So God can do the same for us, certainly, if we stray. So the answer to the question, maybe. It could be, or it might just be the natural effects of sin in life. Regardless, let's stay close to the Lord so no matter what he allows, we have his strength to live each day.